Hello comrades, and welcome to Oddy's encounter with the ideas of a young Karl Marx. Today we'll take selections from some of his earlier philosophical thought from a text known as alternatively, the Economic and Philosophic Manuscripts of 1844, or the Paris Notebooks. The sections that I will be dredging up today are lifted from a Cambridge University Press History of Political Thought series edition titled Early Political Writings, edited by Joseph O'Malley. Undoubtedly this is a bourgeois source. Nonetheless, I think there can be value in what will proceed. As long as we don't let the young Marx's super spooky Hegelianism get us filling our pants with ectoplasm, we should be fine and dandy, and we might even get a better grip in what all this shit about communism is and is not, following the spook. Be aware I might jump back in from time to time. Let us proceed. The activity of labor does not just produce commodities, but also turns itself and the worker into a commodity, and it does this to the same extent that it produces commodities in general. This fact simply expresses the following: the object that labor produces, labor's own product, confronts it as an alien thing, a power independent of the producer. The product of labor is labor that has taken the form of an object, labor that has made itself into a thing. It is the transformation of labor into an object. The actualization of labor is its objectification. But in present economic conditions, labor's actualization carries with the worker's loss of actualization. Labor's objectification is the worker's loss of the object and servitude to it, and instead of appropriation, there is for the worker estrangement, alienation. So much is labor's actualization the worker's loss of it that this loss goes even to the point of death by starvation. Fast forward a bit. And so much is the worker's relation to the object one of estrangement instead of appropriation that the more objects she produces the less he can possess and the more he falls under the domination of his product, capital. Cal, this labor stuff is vague, kind and unclear. Mind if I give some context? By labor he means wage slavery. Being dependent on money. Karl goes on to talk about how the same estrangement thought applies also to religion. But I wonder if it isn't further? Because labor is undertaken at least to some extent on the environment, the substance with which labor combines to produce. Aren't we estranging ourselves from the natural environment to the same extent that the wealth created via the combination of our labor and the material world is expropriated by the bourgeoisie? What about identity? Aren't we estranged from our real identity, boo, to the degree to which identity becomes actualized, categorized, commercialized, marketed and sold? A subtly disturbing, and tragically common phenomenon? Take another example such as race. To the degree that the idea is actualized, realized, there is racial bigotry. You might say we're onto something about some form of person, individual being subject to abstract categories and vague ideas, another one, nobility. Damn sheer regular spook fest tonight. But let's press on. The worker can create nothing without nature, without the sensuous external world. This world is the matter in which his labor is actualized, within which it is active, out of and by means of which it produces. But just as nature provides labor its means of life, in the sense that labor cannot exist without objects on which to exercise itself, so too it furnishes the means of life in the more particular sense of the means of physical subsistence of the worker himself. Therefore, in two respects, the worker becomes enslaved to his object. First, in getting an object of labor, that is in getting work, and his second, in receiving his means of subsistence. In the first respect he can be a worker, and the second she can exist as a physical subject. The peak of this slavery is this: it is only as a worker that he can maintain himself as a physical subject, while as a worker he is only a physical subject, skipping through. In what does the alienation of labor consist? First, that labor is external to the worker, that is not part of his very being, that in his work, therefore, he does not affirm herself but denies himself, feels miserable instead of satisfied, does not freely exercise and develop physical and intellectual energy but mortifies his body and ruins his mind. And so the worker only feels herself outside her work, and his work feels outside himself. She is at home when not working and is not at home in her work. His labor is therefore, not voluntary but coerced, forced labor. It is not the satisfaction of a need but rather just a means to satisfy needs outside itself. Its estranged character is clearly evident in the fact that when no physical or other compulsion is present, labor is avoided like the plague. So the worker's activity is not his self-activity. It belongs to another and is his loss of self. Moving along. Nature, insofar as it is not itself a human body, is man's inorganic body. Man lives from nature, which means that nature is his body with which he must maintain a constant interchange so as not to die. That people's physical and mental life is connected to nature means simply that nature is connected to itself, for people are a part of nature. For labor, life activity, productive life itself, seems to man from the outset to be merely a means to satisfy a need, the need to maintain his physical existence. But productive life is species life. It is life-generating life. The whole character of a species, its species character lies in the form of its life activity, and free conscious activity is the species character of humanity. Yet this life itself seems a mere means to life. Just a quick philosophic interlude. I would say when we take our life activity as a means to life, rather than being something we freely determine, we commit the basic error of capitalist society, selling today to pay for tomorrow. In such a fashion one never achieves actual satisfaction out of life as the pursuit is always aimed towards the future. Only by having our life activity be free conscious activity, autonomous self-determined activity, not constricted, can we hope to become unalienated and unestranged from life, nature, etc. Moving along. The statement that man is estranged from his species being means that one man is estranged from the other and that each is estranged from their common human nature. And further through. The relationship of the laborer to labor engenders the relationship to it of the capitalist, or whatever else those having mastery over labor might be called. Like managers, bureaucrats, the state, the party, etc., then he gets into his early conception of communism. There is communism, which is the full positive superseding of private property, of human self-estrangement, and consequently the actual appropriating of the human essence by and for man, the complete and conscious return of man to himself as a social, that is human being, accomplished within the entire wealth of previous development. This communism, as fulfilled naturalism, equals humanism, and as fulfilled humanism equals naturalism. It is the genuine resolution of the conflict of man with nature and of man with man, the true resolution of the conflict between existence and essence, objectification and self-affirmation, freedom and necessity, individual and species. It is the solution of the enigma of history and knows itself to be that. The entire movement of history, as communism's actual act of genesis, is the birth act of its empirical existence, is also, for thinking consciousness, the comprehended and known process of its becoming. Material, directly sensibly private property is the material sensible expression of estranged human life. The positive superseding of private property as the appropriating of human life is therefore the positive superseding of all estrangement, and thus man's return from religion, family, state, etc. to his human, that is social existence. Religious estrangement as such occurs only in the realm of consciousness or man's inner life, but economic estrangement is that of actual life, and so its supersession brings supersession in both spheres. I would say that in an essentially post-religious age, although not free of the totality of its influences by any means, the evisceration of actual life by economic estrangement creates new pseudo-religious realms into which the fractured egos can escape their denial. Only by confining itself to the menial, approved, condoned forms of culture, can the ego shake of the pressure which forces it into conformity. Thus is there a new religious, or cultural if you like, estrangement in the forms of commercialism, consumerism, hollow individualism, superficial sensuous egotism and social stratification. This is, as I see it, On the level of consciousness, the negative dialectical antithesis of the economic estrangement of actual life, by negative I mean structured by the Herrschaftsgeist, dominion spirit, conditioned to be a part of the upward transmutation and centralization of bourgeois dominance, to which the only positive antithesis is an ever-widening sphere of individual egonomy, egotistical autonomy. Skipping along. Man's activity and enjoyment, in their content and their mode of existence, are social activity and social enjoyment. The human essence of nature is there only for social man, because only for him is nature a bond with man, his existence for the other and the other for him, and the foundation of his own human existence, the life element of human actuality. Only in social man have natural and human existence come to coincide, only in him has nature become man. Thus society is the fulfilled essential unity of man and nature, the true resurrection of nature, the accomplished naturalism of man and the accomplished humanism of nature. He then proceeds through some of the spookiest shit written during the heady days of young Hegelianism. Social activity and social enjoyment exist by no means only in the form of some directly communal activity and directly communal enjoyment, although communal activity and communal enjoyment, that is, activity and enjoyment which are manifested and directly revealed in real association with other men, will occur wherever such a direct expression of sociability stems from the true character of the activity's content and is appropriate to the nature of the enjoyment, but also when I am active scientifically, etc. an activity which I can seldom perform in direct community with others, then my activity is social, because I perform it as a man. Not only is the material of my activity given to me as a social product, as is even the language in which the thinker is active, my own existence is social activity, and therefore that which I make of myself, I make of myself for society and with the consciousness of myself as a social being. My general consciousness is only the theoretical shape of that of which the living shape is the real community, the social fabric, although at the present day general consciousness is an abstraction from real life and as such confronts it with hostility. The activity of my general consciousness, as an activity, is therefore also my theoretical existence as a social being. Above all, we must avoid postulating society again as an abstraction vis-à-vis the individual. The individual is the social being. His manifestations of life, even if they may not appear in the direct form of communal manifestations of life carried out in association with others, are therefore an expression and confirmation of social life. Man's individual and species life are not different, however much, and this is inevitable. The mode of existence of the individual is a more particular or more general mode of the life of the species, or the life of the species is a more particular or more general individual life. In his consciousness of species, man confirms his real social life and simply repeats his real existence in thought, just as conversely the being of the species confirms itself in species consciousness and exists for itself in its generality as a thinking being. Man, much as he may therefore be a particular individual, and it is precisely his particularity which makes him an individual, and a real individual social being, is just as much the totality, the ideal totality, the subjective existence of imagined and experienced society for itself, just as he exists also in the real world both as awareness and real enjoyment of social existence, and as a totality of human manifestation of life. Thinking and being are thus certainly distinct, but at the same time they are in unity with each other. Death seems to be a harsh victory of the species over the particular individual and to contradict their unity. But the particular individual is only a particular species being, and as such mortal. Private property has made us so stupid and one-sided that an object is only ours when we have it, when it exists for us as capital, or when it is directly possessed, eaten, drunk, worn, inhabited, etc. In short, when it is used by us. Although private property itself again conceives all these direct realizations of possession only as means of life, and the life which they serve as means is the life of private property, labor and conversion into capital. In the place of all physical and mental senses there has therefore come the sheer estrangement of all these senses, the sense of having, The human being had to be reduced to this absolute poverty in order that he might yield his inner wealth to the outer world. The transcendence of private property is therefore the complete emancipation of all human senses and qualities. Moving ahead, we come to, because socialist man understands the entire so-called history of the world is nothing but the creation of man through human labor, nothing but the emergence of nature for man, so he has the visible, irrefutable proof of his birth through himself, of his genesis. Since the real existence of man and nature has become evident in practice, through sense experience, because man has thus become evident for man as the being of nature, and nature for man as the being of man, the question about an alien being, about a being above nature and man, a question which implies the admission of the unreality of nature and of man, has become impossible in practice. Atheism, as the denial of this unreality, has no longer any meaning, for atheism is a negation of God, and postulates the existence of man through this negation. But socialism as socialism no longer stands in any need of such a mediation. It proceeds from the theoretically and practically sensuous consciousness of man and of nature as the essence. Socialism is man's positive self-consciousness, no longer mediated through the abolition of religion, just as real life is man's positive reality, no longer mediated through the abolition of private property, through communism. Communism is the positive mode as the negation of the negation, and is hence the actual phase necessary for the next stage of historical development in the process of human emancipation and rehabilitation. Communism is the necessary form and the dynamic principle of the immediate future, but communism as such is not the goal of human development, the form of human society. Lastly, here is a description of unalienated labor. Let us suppose that we had carried out production as human beings. Each of us would have in two ways affirmed himself and the other person. 1. In my production I would have objectified my individuality, its specific character, and therefore enjoyed not only an individual manifestation of my life during the activity, but also when looking at the object I would have the individual pleasure of knowing my personality to be objective, visible to the senses and hence a power beyond all doubt. 2. In your enjoyment or use of my product I would have the direct enjoyment both of being conscious of having satisfied a human need by my work, that is, of having objectified man's essential nature, and of having thus created an object corresponding to the need of another man's essential nature. 3. I would have been for you the mediator between you and the species, and therefore would become recognized and felt by you yourself as a completion of your own essential nature and as a necessary part of yourself, and consequently would know myself to be confirmed both in your thought and your love. 4. In the individual expression of my life I would have directly created your expression of your life, and therefore in my individual activity I would have directly confirmed and realized my true nature, my human nature, my communal nature. Our products would be so many mirrors in which we saw reflected our essential nature. This relationship would moreover be reciprocal. What occurs on my side has also to occur on yours. Let us review the various factors as seen in our supposition. My work would be a free manifestation of life, hence an enjoyment of life. Presupposing private property, my work is an alienation of life, for I work in order to live, in order to obtain for myself the means of life. My work is not my life. Secondly, the specific nature of my individuality, therefore, would be affirmed in my labor, since the latter would be an affirmation of my individual life. Labor therefore would be true, active property. Presupposing private property, my individuality is alienated to such a degree that this activity is instead hateful to me, a torment, and rather the semblance of an activity. Hence, too, it is only a forced activity and one imposed on me only through an external fortuitous need, not through an inner, essential one. That's all I want to highlight for now, comrades. Thanks for listening. I hope the young Carl gave you some insight. Later I'll post some stuff on Hegel, some older Marx. Till then, peace out.